So it's Krawchuk who has written Atlas Snubbed, and it's a spoof on the famous Ayn Rand novel. So please welcome him.
Good morning, Anarchapulco. How are you doing today?
Great.
Yeah, I am too. It is great to be here. First, I'd like to thank Jeff Krawchuk and Swiss Pedals for sponsoring this, putting it all together. It finally answers that oxymoronic question: who organizes an anarchist convention? It's pretty cool what Jeff's put together here. I kind of look at it as the No State project. Very, very nice. In the interest of full disclosure, I have to say right up front, I am not an anarchist. In fact, I'm a player in the game. I was the Libertarian Party candidate for governor of Pennsylvania, so I'm deep, deep inside what's going on. Now, I really call myself an agoran libertarian because as a libertarian, I do believe in the non-aggression principle. You have the right to live your life your way without interference, provided only that you respect the rights and property of others. I've taken that as the golden rule and I've put it on a political level. And I've gone across Pennsylvania putting out that message to everybody. And in fact, when I was on Anarchast, I guess it was about 6 or 8 months ago, by the time we were done, Jeff actually endorsed my candidacy for governor of Pennsylvania. That was odd. You know, it's like the Pope endorsing Satan or something like that. I don't know. He says, Ken, you don't realize you're really an anarchist. If you believe in the non-aggression principle, you're one of us. Well, it depends. Depends how you look at it. Because anarchy is a difficult concept. I mean, if you look at the root of the word, anarchy means no leader, no master, whatever it is. And Jeff was talking yesterday in his keynote about how there's going to be a transition. The state is starting to fall. We can see it. We can hear the winds of its destruction whistling through its branches already. But what's going to happen when the state finally collapses? I think it's going to be like a ball. The state is going to fall and bounce back to something. Anarchy is going to be that split second when the ball is bouncing back. There will be nothing at that point. When we bounce back, what are we going to get? I put it to you that we are going to have some sort of a rule. Anarchy, total anarchy will exist only for a split second, and then it's going to bounce back into something. That something could be property rights, might make rights, no rights, do without will shall be the whole of the law. I don't know. None of us can say right now. It's going to be something. It's going to bounce back to some sort of rules. Not my rules, not your rules, just some rules. So, after anarchy, after that split second, what are we going to get? What will we want? How are we going to get that? And that's the title of my talk today. After anarchy, what? I'm here to let us know that we should be ready for that transition. And my goal is to suggest 3 things. The separation of society and state, the separation of courts and state, and the separation of regulation and state. Those 3 themes are the triple theme of my novel, Atlas Snubbed. I call their combination a newarchy, because it's a different way of looking at things. I'd like to talk about each one of those 3 things. I'm going to talk about them briefly, because I'm going to quickly get to the Q&A, because I know there's a lot of questions. I've been through this before. It's a new approach. But before I get into those 3 different separations, let me talk a little bit about the book as a book, or as Ayn Rand might say, the book qua book. It's a parody, a pastiche parody, meaning I took pieces of Ayn Rand's book and put it together. And it's not a ha-ha parody, it's more of a parody. Because you see, when I was the Libertarian candidate for governor, I found myself in an interesting position. Ayn Rand is the philosophical matriarch of the Libertarian Party. And as a high-profile candidate, I found myself in a position where I had to defend her philosophy to the public at large. I found that task to be, in part, impossible, because some parts of her philosophy, they're simply indefensible. So what I did is I came up with a way to explain where those holes are in objectivism, and what political solutions I would suggest to fill those holes. That's how Atlas Snubbed was born. The story follows Atlas Shrugged immediately. How many of you have read Atlas Shrugged? Yeah, of course, I'm in the right group, you can tell. This starts immediately at the end. Atlas Shrugged ends with Eddie Willers stranded on a dead train in the middle of the desert. Chapter 1 starts with Eddie Willers stranded on a dead train in the middle of the desert. He is my anti-hero. He survives. Yay. He makes it back to Las Vegas, and in Las Vegas, he sets up a society based exclusively on the non-aggression principle. Because if you remember from Atlas Shrugged, Eddie was a good guy. You know, why did he get left behind? That always annoyed me. So that's one of the reasons why he had to be my anti-hero. Also, he's also struggling all the time to do whatever is right. So when he gets into Las Vegas, now the United States has crumbled around him. There was fighting in the streets, there was famine, all the bureaucrats have fled, there's nothing left. Las Vegas is isolated in the middle of the desert. So Eddie finds himself faced with one challenge after another, and using only the non-aggression principle, he rebuilds Las Vegas. So with that background, let me now touch upon the three things that Eddie does. Separation of society and state, courts and state, and regulation and state. His first challenge is to care for the poor, care for the sick, care for all the refugees that are pouring into town who are victims of the collapse of the United States of America. Now, somebody says, oh, hey, why don't you just institute a tax? Of course, Eddie's like, well, taxation is theft. What right do I have to take your money? Skipping all the ins and outs, because instead I want to get the Q&A as quickly as possible. What Eddie does is he separates society and state. He takes the Constitution for the United States of America and changes it around a little bit. He keeps the President, he keeps Congress, he keeps the Supreme Court, but he makes one change. He calls it society. Society is the organization which will take care of the poor. What they do is they pass guidelines, not laws, guidelines, and they solicit funds. So using the exact same setup as the government, Eddie sets up society. Society looks like government, has a constitution like government, passes guidelines to help the poor, but the main difference between society and government is that society does not have the coercive power of taxation. In fact, society has no coercive powers at all. So they can pass a Social Security Act, but they couldn't garnish your wages to pay for it. They can establish free education, but they couldn't levy a property tax to pay for it. They could put in curb cuts in the corner, but they couldn't put in an earned income tax to pay for it. Anything they want, they have to get that money voluntarily. They have to do fund drives, bake sales, whatever it takes. Now with that situation, people said, Eddie, I don't know one person in 10 is going to contribute. Eddie's like, that's fine. Whatever they contribute, this is going to be our budget, and if we need more money, we'll just go back to the people and ask. So with that, Eddie established a society. This is something we need here in America today. Do you know that 60% of the federal budget is currently dedicated to giveaway programs? I know my numbers are going to be a little bit out of date, but federal budget is about $3.5 trillion at the moment. $2.2 trillion goes out the door in giveaway. Worse yet, federal income is $2.3 trillion. Virtually every dollar coming in the door goes out for welfare. I suggest to you that come the day that ball bounces, we should be ready now by establishing society here in America. We should separate society and state and start now to replace all those functions of government that are helping the poor, that are helping the hungry. Now, of course, it's not going to be as big as it is today, and that's a good thing, but it's all going to be done voluntarily. Separation of society and state, because we cannot continue with America going down the path it's going. So that's part one, separation of society and state. The second one, and this is the one, I've done the tea parties with this, and they love it and they hate it. One of the functions of government that we need to replace is the court system. We do not get justice from the court system. In fact, in Pennsylvania, you know that for every one white person who goes to jail, 15 minorities go to jail. And if you look at the 18 to 25-year-old range, It's 55-1. I address a black audience and I say, how do you think that we get justice in America? This is my point. How many of you? Nobody raises their hand. What Eddie does is there's a bandit in town. And they catch the bandit. They got dropped on cold. But Eddie says, we've got to give the man a fair trial. Now, there's no court system in Las Vegas. There's no mayor. There's no nothing. Everything's gone. So Eddie turns judge. And he says, I'm going to use the non-aggression principle. You have the right to live your life your way, without interference, provided only respect the rights and property of others. Obviously, the bandit is not respecting the rights and property of others, so that's why he's there in court. And he's in a room like this, just about as crowded as this, and he said, all right, start counting off with you. Every second person up to the jury box. The bandit said, no! I can interview them. And he says, what, you want to stack the jury? Now, Eddie says, every second person, the jury becomes the people who run the trial. Eddie's only a referee. The jury hears all the evidence. The jury questions people directly. They talk among themselves. It's like anarchy, right? Jury nullification taken to the extreme. They find the bandit guilty. Like I said, it's an open and shut case. Like I can make things two-dimensional too. Comes the moment of sentencing. And he says to the bandit, you're a smart guy. I'll tell you what, I recommend the following sentence. The Boulder Dam power plant, we don't have enough engineers down there. You're a smart guy. I would like to exile you to the plant for a period of 1 year. While you're there, you'll be given a chance to learn how the plant operates, and then pay you a fair wage. So you're on the road to rehabilitation. And I recommend that sentence. The bandit says, do you accept the sentence? The bandit says, what? And he says, do you accept the sentence? I have no authority over you. You have the right to live your life your way. It's your choice whether you accept the sentence or not. The bandit thinks about it for a minute. He's thinking just projecting it out of hand, but he thought, no, let me do this, because things fall apart, I can always run away or go back to a life of crime. He accepts the sentence. With that, Eddie establishes a new form of justice based on the non-aggression principle, where the accused, the convicted, decides whether or not to accept the sentence. And it's the second trial. Of course, there's a guy, he's arrogant, he's sentenced to 3 months of exile. He's like, the heck with you, I'm not going to accept your sentence. And he gets up and he walks out. And of course, Eddie has no authority to stop him. He's a good guy. He's not going to use force on somebody. What happens is that bandit has now removed himself from the justice system. By not agreeing to the justice that was levied out, he's saying that he's no longer part of that justice system, so he can no longer call upon it in the future. So when the bandit gets home, his apartment's already been ransacked. Everything's been stolen. He can't now go to the court and say, hey, I've been robbed. Sorry, you stepped outside the court system. You're now literally outside the law. He's walking down the street, people start making pot shots at him. Start yelling at him. He has no rights anymore. Now he can't react under the judicial system. He hides. That night, he crawls back to the police station, turns himself in, acceptance, exile. That's how we separate courts and state. Make it voluntary. Choose whether or not you want to stay inside the system. You choose whether or not you accept the sentence. And anyone can form a court, because there's one key point that underlies the strength of that court. As I said before, I'm not an anarchist because I believe in government. The reason why I believe in government is because I believe in a certain definition of government. Now when I say that, I'm not an anarchist. People say, oh, you believe in invading foreign countries. Oh, you believe in robbing old ladies who living in their houses and property. My definition of government is not somebody who initiates the use of force. My definition of government is a common body of law. Common body of law. A single set of rules. So that when we bounce, the single set of rules that I would like to come back to is that non-aggression principle. Just as Eddie has done. Now you can have a government which has aggression in it, like we have now. One of the rules could be, yeah, we can beat you up anytime we want. Yeah, we can play shiny badge guy. Eddie's government doesn't do that. It's imperative to have that common body of law. Eddie's common body of law, I said 3 times, I say it 4th time. You have the right to live your life your way without interference, provided only that you respect the rights of property owners. The police chief actually carves it in wood, puts it above Eddie's head. And that's how he runs Las Vegas. Alright, so I've done separation of society and state. Eddie set up a society to take care of the poor, people can't take care of themselves. We've now eliminated the welfare state, the biggest cost in America. Second thing, we've now gotten rid of the judicial system, gotten rid of the lawyers, we've gotten rid of the judges. All that's left is juries with jury nullification. There's somebody between those who can't help themselves and bad guys. The rest of us. We come into a hotel like this, we don't expect the ceiling to fall on our head, although it can come on our heads down there. We got hit by that when the ceiling came in. So that leads to the 3rd point of the novel, and that's the separation of regulation and state. Now we need regulations. We need things like quality of cleanliness of food, building codes, banking regulations. We need these things. We need these rules. Now, we as freedom lovers know that the best people to do that are those of us in the free market, not the government. Underwriters Laboratory does a much better job than the government does. So Eddie's in town, and one of the bankers starts inflating the currency. He starts taking in silver and gold, which, by the way, Eddie has reestablished as the currency. And he starts practicing fractional banking. Now, they suspect this, they don't know it. And people say, Eddie, you gotta have regulation in there, we're gonna go in and audit his books. And he's like, I have no right to go in there. So what Eddie does is he extends the ability of society, again, with coercive powers, to regulate the affairs of business and other things like that, whether it's marriage, building codes, driver's licenses, I'll get to that too. All these sorts of things. But it's all done on a voluntary basis. So that way, in the book, there are 2 bankers in town. There's the one who's inflating the currency with fractional banking, and the other one who's doing honest banking. Society passes a guideline, and not a law, it's a guideline, you follow it or not, saying, here are the rules if you would like to be a societally approved banker. And one banker says, oh, that's fine, I do that. He puts up a big sign out front, approved by society. And the other banker, he's like, I'm not going to follow your rules. And he can't put out that sign. Next thing you know, people pulling money out of his bank because they know what he's doing, and they're putting it into the other guy's bank. He winds up having to shut down. So that's just a simple example. As I said, I want to go through this quickly. But that's a simple example of how society sets the guidelines. And you can choose whether or not to do that. So if you're doing something new, like for example in my earlier days, acupuncture was brand new. We used to laugh at it. Oh yeah, stick needles. But it turns out acupuncture is a very viable way of doing things. Governments used to forbid that. But under any society, what would happen is you could do that, you just couldn't hang out that sign. Maybe you met all the cleanliness guidelines, maybe you met all the banking guidelines, maybe you met all the other guidelines, but you could hang out the sign saying, society approved, except acupuncture. And you, the individual, could decide whether or not you would want to chance it. You can come into a hotel that allows smoking. And by the way, speaking as a guy from Pennsylvania, an ex-smoker, I love coming in here and smelling tobacco. Yes. Reminds me when I was a kid, for 24 years ago, quit smoking. It's like I'm starting in New York, and I might do it for you. Anyway, so that's how Eddie sets it up. Regulations are voluntary. You choose whether or not to follow them. You choose whether or not to patronize someone. All of it, Eddie's entire society is based on the non-aggression principle, whether it's separation of society and state helping the poor, separation of courts and state to take care of the bad guys, separation of regulation and state to make sure that we have a safe environment to hang out and an environment to grow. So at that point, I'm going to stop and open it up to questions, because I know there are questions. Like I said, sure, the Tea Party people. Are you saying that I could shoot this guy if he refuses the sentence? Yes. Questions? I'm going to start with the cross front to the back. So,
would you consider this community. I have to call it community instead of society, but having multiple of these societies.
That's right. The question is, can we have multiple societies? Yes. And there's no reason why not, because none of them have the authority to tell you what to do. None of them have any kind of ability to force you to do anything. So if there are 2 societies, 5 societies, that's great. You have twice as many, 5 times as many people helping other people, setting standards. And in fact, in the book that happens, a few of them wind up focusing in on one area. And there are a couple different courts. Anybody can put up a court too. So there's a regular court, and a bunch of old ladies get together, and they try to outlaw prostitution. Of course, it doesn't work. Sorry.
Yeah. So if there are multiple societies in one particular area, then you don't really have a common set of laws or a common set of rules.
2 things. Society is a voluntary organization where you donate money and they distribute that money to help people. It's got nothing to do with the rules. You're talking about courts at the state. If other people set up, you still have the same common body of law, which is you have the right to live your life your way without interference, non-aggression principle. So that remains a common body of law. All these societies, well, none of them have the right to initiate the use of force. So that common body of law is still there. Does that answer the question? Yeah, thank you.
Hi. First of all, it's a pleasure to hear your the fictional story you write and fiction. Done a lot of thinking, just like everybody else in the room most likely has done so. But you put it on paper and you look pretty much presentable. My first question is, did you use like a think tank to come up with this? Because I know that when someone thinks to themselves all the time, they kind of like tend to go in the wrong direction in one way or another.
But the short answer to that is no, I did not go to the think tank. What I did is I went out into the real world. As I said, I ran for governor of Pennsylvania and I saw what the questions were. People care about what's happening to other people. We're never going to get elected. We say, oh, we're going to end Social Security. No, you have to say, here's how we're going to help the elderly. You can't say, oh, we're going to end all regulation. No. Here's how we're going to protect people. Now, I've been in the libertarian movement 20-some years. I've read all the books. I mean, I've been starting with John Locke, who made a fatal mistake. I can talk about that in a minute if you like. All the way through all the various thinkers, Friedman, and everybody. I mean, I've been through it all. And I have not found many people who have viable solutions. I've looked at DROs, and if you're outside of DRO, or if you're poor, I mean, there are problems with each one of these. These approaches that I talk about, I don't think there are any problems with people find them. I'd love to hear them, because this is version 1.1, I come out with 1.2. And your other question?
Well, actually, it's about number 2. Would number 2 be an extension of this, or are you in a position of flexing your opinion to a point where number 2 will be just a revision of this one?
Absolutely. If I find something where I made a mistake, or there's a better way of doing this, absolutely I would include it in there. In fact, in the new version, this is a 1.0, but the 1.1 has a little star on the bottom there, and that indicates that this is the seal of society.
Got it.
So that's something new. So if anybody has any ideas on how to improve this, I'd love to hear it. Absolutely love to hear it.
Well, you can hear from me before I pass the mic on. That the banking issue should be really left not to a regulator, but to the people who actually deposit money in the bank.
Well, they can do that. They can do that by ignoring the societal regulation and going to a bank that has its own regulation. And if it was something that was popular, the people who thought it was important, they would run for positions in society and pass the guidelines that would make that the rule. That's the beauty of it, because we're not being forced to do what you like.
So there's going to be quite a race to who regulates. Here we go.
Yes, and you can choose your regulator. That's freedom. Thank you.
So, what is the difference between these societies and DROs?
DROs cost money. Well, anyway, they're 2 different things. Society takes care of the needs of people. People who can't help themselves or whatever it may be. Completely separate. DROs look into dispute resolution. That's what the DR means, right? So if there's a dispute, it could either be a bad guy, like a bandit. Well, in order to explain that, you have a jury. 100% jury nullification power. The jury decides everything. So there's no cost involved. You don't have to belong to the DRO. You can form your own court. We could have a court right here. I said, all right, let's convene the court. Last night somebody threw up in my car and I want them to clean it up, or whatever it's going to do. So we don't need a DRO. And as I mentioned before, I see a couple of problems with DROs. They cost money. What if I don't have any money? What if I don't like your DRO for whatever reason? As long as the DRO is buying into that same single body of law, my government is one from anarchists. As long as they buy into that single body of law, we're in good shape. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just understand the difference between anarchy
and anarcho-capitalism. It sounds like it's pretty much the same thing.
It is close. But what this is, the big difference, is that this is a workable alternative. I've taken this out on the campaign trail. I have done this in front of innumerable audiences. And one of the reasons why I'm glad I'm here is because you guys are smart. You guys already know it. You already know a lot of the background people and everything like that. I want to get the feedback. But yeah, it's just like anarcho-capitalism, but it's a workable alternative, and it's not anarcho. It is new-archo.
Isn't it just an implementation of anarcho-capitalism?
Yeah, you can call it implementation of anarcho-capitalism, but it's a workable one. It's something we can start doing today, so that when that ball bounces, we've got something to get bounced back to.
Who pays Eddie?
I'm sorry? Who plays Eddie? I don't know.
Who pays Eddie?
Who pays Eddie? Nobody pays Eddie. And Eddie actually says that because I'm a volunteer. So Eddie comes up and he runs his own court. Anybody who wants to can run their own court, as long as they're still within that single body of law. So nobody pays Eddie. Nobody pays the jurors. Nobody pays anybody. The police, they get paid, but they have a, kind of like a DRO, but it's a protection racket. That's one of the local nurses, but it's a protection racket. They say, hey, if you're a subscriber, kind of like we were talking about with, what was that? Peacekeeper, Safekeeper? Right, the app. If you're a member, it's $5 a month, and we'll just do it for you. But if you hit that button and you're not a subscriber, well, it's going to cost you a little more. That's exactly how the police department is set up in Las Vegas. And that's another thing that Eddie says. You got to read the book. He goes through all the little problems of everyday life to figure out how to solve them without holding it up your head. Even the driver's license issue. The priest says, why don't you institute driver's licenses? And he said, what right do I have to saddle you with the driver's license? Well, you're punishing all the good people for the sake of one bad guy. So what he does, he issues not a driver's license, but a can't license. Can't drive. There was one young girl, 14-year-old, she's spinning through town and everything. They drag her to court because she's scaring people, almost running people down and everything. And Eddie, as the sentence, he says, I sentence you to a can't drive license. And if we catch you driving, we're going to throw you in the clinker for a night. If we catch you driving a second time, we'll throw you for 2 nights. Do you accept the sentence? The girl's like, yes, I accept the sentence. She goes back. So she doesn't drive for 6 months. So I would do that for can't drive license, can't carry license, if you're shooting off your guns stupid times. There's a miner outside of town who's found in the street. He gets a can't mine license until he cleans up his act. And
Last question, time is coming out.
In Atlas Shrugged, I know Rand used certain characters to kind of be a vehicle for her philosophy.
Yes.
In a lot of ways, whether it was Ragnar, whether it was Nikolai. Eddie wasn't one of those types of characters. First question, do you use that approach with him and make him one of those characters? And if not, is there any other types of characters that spring up that do that? Please.
2 answers to that. First one is, I strove mightily to portray every character exactly as Rand did. So I have about half the characters in the book are borrowed from her, including Eddie. I take quotes directly out of their mouth and repeat them. Sometimes I take a quote from one of her heroes and put it in the mouth of one of her bad guys, which is always interesting, which is why it's a parody. But I do it in a serious fashion. But I follow exactly how each of these people react. And if they act out of character, it just doesn't ring true when you read it. Now I come up with a lot of my own characters, but each one portrays something else. I have a religious dictatorship in there which follows her back to God. To that California, they were taking over all of California at the end of that shrug. Well, they won. So what I do is I contrast back to God with their religious intolerance with Galt's Gulch, with their religious intolerance. And also, it includes in there a fictionalization of the David Kelly split, where Galt's Gulch, about a year into it, all of a sudden there's some people who want to go outside and deal with the looters outside. And those, no, you can't. It's a mark of your evil if you deal with the looters. So there's a split, and half the people in the Gulch have to leave. And there's one other thing, one of my characters, Gwen Ives, I pick on all the people that Ayn Rand pushed to the side. They're the ones I bring to the fore. Gwen Ives questions Galt's pledge, Galt's oath, and Stryker's oath. Because to be in the valley, you've got to stay there. You've got to take the oath. Reardon brings in Gwen, his chief metallurgist Pete, his company doctor, a few others. None of them have taken the oath. So they get 3 months to take the oath. And Gwen is trying to figure out what the oath is and how it's going to affect her. Can she honestly take it? And she realizes the oath means nothing. Nothing at all. And I'm not going to tell you that she spoke about my book. I will be sitting over here for the rest of today. I brought with me a box of hard copy. I've also got PDF, Apple, Nook, Kindle, whatever it is you like. I take Bitcoin, I take FRNs, I take credit cards, although it is, the PayPal interface is a little bit clunky from here. It requires that you establish a PayPal account. It doesn't do that in America. I don't know why. But I'll be here all day. If you have any questions, I'll be here all week, and I'm leaving on Monday. And I guess I'm getting red flag.
Thanks, Jim.